Welcome, NBA fans, to another episode of the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. Make sure you follow OTG on Twitter at OTG Basketball. Also, hit that subscribe button. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me tonight, OTG's Corey Waldron. How you doing, Corey?
Hey, Nick. How you doing? Happy to be back here talking more free agency.
More free agency. It's not going to be as exciting as the last few episodes. We've had a lot of signings to talk about. But today, we got a few role players, a few young guys that signed. We'll start with probably the biggest one, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. One-year deal with the Lakers, $18 million. A little surprising you took the one-year deal. What are your thoughts on this?
Slightly surprising only because, the Lakers are, they're in all these rumors for, Paul George next year, LeBron next year. And they already have Brandon Ingram, Lonzo, Clarkson. It's just a lot of, young players. And, they're always attached to big star players for the next season to come. It was just a little bit out of left field, quite frankly. I kind of thought, like you kind of were hoping that he might go to Brooklyn because, Brooklyn has the most money to offer and give. But definitely for the Lakers, it's kind of a steal for 1 year. You might be able to bring him back next year if you want to. Or either way, he's just a young player who plays defense, can score. And, he's 24, so it helps the young Lakers core.
Yeah, like you said, it's a win-win deal for the Lakers. A one-year deal, they get a stopgap at shooting guard, a young player that can develop further, and then they still have the cap flexibility for next year if they want to try to bring in LeBron and Paul George. If they miss out on those guys, they bring back KCP, got a two-guard to put next to Lonzo. Solid move for the Lakers, and it's kind of surprising, being a young player taking the one-year deal, not taking the big paycheck, especially considering so many teams are over the luxury tax, and next season, there's not going to be a ton of money out there.
Yeah, and like any 1 year deal, especially when you're 24, there's always the concern that, if you play poorly, if, God forbid you get hurt, you could lose out on a lot of money in the future.
Exactly. There is that risk, we hate to mention it, but, if he did get injured or he has a bad season or he just comes off an injury, it's going to be harder for him to get that long-term deal. And, you probably think he probably could have got a decent deal from the Nets maybe, but like I mentioned, there's only a few teams that have the cap money this offseason that could still offer to him. He kind of got put in a bad position by the Pistons, starting out as a restricted free agent and then being an unrestricted free agent after everybody already spent their money. It put him in kind of no man's land.
And also, I just kind of thought about this right now. It being a 1 year deal, who knows what could happen next offseason? Maybe if the Lakers have the possibility of bringing in Paul George, maybe if they can bring in and LeBron James, maybe Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, because he's on a 1 year deal, comes back for less money and the chance to actually contend for a title. For the Lakers, it opens up a lot of opportunities possibly.
Yeah, and you never know what they could do with money. Kind of work some things around, and maybe set them up with a different deal or something, because they'll have guys like Lonzo and Ingram on rookie deals, and maybe they keep KCP if they miss out on those guys, or maybe they only get one and they keep him. Young player at 24, like you mentioned, he's a great defender. He could probably even get better. Offensively is where he needs to take that next step, especially becoming a more consistent shooter and attacking the rim a little bit more.
Yeah, and being signed to the 1 year deal, he's already probably the Lakers' best defender on the roster of this young team.
Exactly, and that's an important. It's important too in the sense that if he is the long-term option, he kind of pairs well next to Lonzo. And the way Lonzo has looked, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it looks like he's the type of guy that's going to make his teammates better.
Yeah, and especially because of just the pace they've been running in Summer League. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a very good off-ball catch-and-shoot player. So he's just one of those guys who you can put around a guy like Lonzo who's going to push the tempo. And as long as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope can find the openings, spread the floor and hit those threes, it's going to be a really good fit next to Lonzo.
Exactly, and they'll have a nice big man in Brook Lopez, my guy, who can work in the post, get some attention, open three for Caldwell-Pope as well. So Lakers will definitely be an interesting team to watch. On to the next signing, another guy that was pretty well noted in free agency. A couple teams were interested. Dwayne Demon, 2 year deal, $14 million with the Atlanta Hawks.
It's a very good signing for the now rebuilding Atlanta Hawks. We really didn't know what direction they were going to take heading into free agency, or actually heading into this offseason. And then, trading Dwight Howard, not even offering Paul Millsap a contract, drafting John Collins, who has looked superb in Summer League. This Dwayne Demon, 2 year deal. He can possibly get moved, at the deadline. It's a friendly contract. He's a veteran. He's been around for a while. He can defend. He can rebound. He'll be a nice guy that John Collins can at least pick some of his game and at least be, a stepping stone for the future of Atlanta.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what Dwayne Demon does in a bigger role. Obviously with the Spurs, he didn't play a ton of minutes. In Orlando, he didn't play a ton of minutes, but he definitely showed up when he did. Kind of gives him, like you mentioned, that inside presence. He's a long guy. He can defend the rim a little bit. He can rebound the ball. It gives him just that veteran inside, which the Hawks don't have. And like we've talked about in the past, you kind of don't want to be a terrible team when you're rebuilding. You at least want to have competent vets around that can kind of teach guys things and at least be in games.
Yeah, Dedmon coming from the Spurs, he's been around a winning culture, so at least he knows what winning feels like. So bringing that to Atlanta in itself can help these young rookies.
Exactly, and Mike Budenholzer being from the Spurs system himself, so it's a kind of a good fit. He knows what he's getting. I'm sure he probably talked to Pop about him a little bit too. So I think it kind of works out for the Hawks, and Dedmon gets a little bit of money. Other guy that the Hawks signed, they re-signed Ersan Ilyasova, 1 year, $6 million. Another veteran to have around, a solid player. Nothing crazy, but another guy that can teach the young kids how to play.
Yeah, he's been in the league for 10 years. He's been on 6 different teams. Atlanta now for just half a season. Well, not even half a season because he was with 3 teams last year. He's a guy that constantly seems to be bouncing around lately. But in today's NBA, he's another guy. He can stretch the 4. He's a pretty good jump shooter. A subpar rebounder. He's only 29. He's going to be 30. And like we said, $6 million for 1 year. If a team is contending late in the season or near the deadline, they're buying, they're trying to find, another stretch forward to take some minutes. Ilyasova is one of those guys that, could be on the move again. But, for the Hawks that we just said are rebuilding, it's a pretty good piece.
Yeah, I think you made a good point. He could be on the move again. He brings good energy. He's a good bench piece. That just he has found a good role in the NBA coming off the bench. And I think that's, the Hawks know what they're getting. Works out for both sides. Moving on to the Jazz, who are kind of recouped from the Gordon Hayward signing with Boston. They picked up Thabo Sefolosha, 2 years, $10.5 million. Great defender, comes in, fits that defensive mold that Utah likes to bring.
Yeah, they're now in this period, after losing Hayward, where they don't have their set starting small forward. They're probably going to bounce around between Joe Ingles, who we saw last year is a very underrated NBA player at times. He can shoot the 3, score, and then adding a guy like Thabo, who's been in the league. He's not as good as OKC days, but he can still defend. He's still a pretty good catch and shoot guy. He's one of the only people who wears Air Maxes instead of basketball shoes in the NBA.
I did not know. I did not know
that's
that.
A fact. That's a fact. You can Google that, and he really wears Air Maxes on the court.
Wow.
Interesting, little tidbit. But, it's a good move for the Jazz, who are now, they like to play defense, as you mentioned, and they're just, trying to find their next small forward. So he's just a guy to fill in the space.
Yeah, and it kind of keeps them competitive, too. They also added Jonas Jerebko, a guy they'll probably bring off the bench, some good energy. It just kind of keeps the Jazz competitive and makes them in that playoff scene, because I still think they're a playoff team. Stay in that level, and like you said, till they find their next big piece. Maybe it's on the roster. They have guys like Rodney Hood, Dante Exum, some young guys that can step up out there.
Yeah, for sure. And mentioned Jonas Jerebko. They waived the older Boris Diaw for Jerebko. And Jerebko is just another guy who just fits in with this new style of NBA. He stretches the floor. He's not a great rebounder by any means or a great defender, but he gives you a little bit more shooting than they had years prior at the 4.
Yeah, and he offers a little versatility. He's a little bit more athletic than you would think for an international player, so he's definitely an impressive guy. Moving on to probably a surprising signing. I don't think a lot of us saw this, and that was Jonathan Simmons signing a 3-year, $20 million deal with Orlando Magic.
I mean, he made the decision, and I'm interested to know if the Spurs, like what the Spurs offered, because I just find it very hard to hard for me to just imagine turning down a chance to contend and win. Even last year in the playoffs when they faced the Warriors in the conference finals, Jonathan Simmons was almost the only San Antonio Spur who was engaged from start to finish once Kawhi got hurt. And that's the one thing you gotta like about a guy like Simmons. He's 27. He's battled through the D League to even get a chance to play in the NBA. Summer League last year, going into the season, he was huge. I mean, he started off, last year to start off the season when the Warriors, lost that game 1 against the Spurs. Jonathan Simmons had a couple of huge dunks in that game that kind of just, set the tone. And it's a very good signing for Orlando. My guy Frank Vogel is the head coach down there. Frank Vogel loves defense and defensive-minded players, and Simmons is that kind of guy who can just slide in. They lost Jeff Green, and they definitely, in my opinion, got a better player in Simmons.
Yeah, and Simmons, like you said, he fits the Vogel mold. He's looking for defensive-minded guys, trying to change the mindset and the culture in Orlando. And definitely Simmons fits that. He plays with high energy. He's going to be engaged. He's fought his way to get here, so he's not going to back down from anything. I think it's a great deal. Going into the offseason, I probably would have projected Jonathan Simmons to get a little bit more money. 3 years, $20 million, not bad for him, not bad for the Magic. It's kind of another with the Spurs thing, though. You mentioned, I was surprised the Spurs didn't retain him.
You know what I think, Nick? Once they signed Rudy Gay, I just kind of think Simmons thought maybe his minutes might have been getting depleted. You know what I'm saying? I'm guessing you bring in a guy like Rudy Gay, you're not going to play Simmons more than Rudy Gay. Or at least Rudy Gay may not be okay with getting less minutes than a Jonathan Simmons. It might be, more of an ego thing. But, it's definitely surprising. And I'm interested to see what Simmons could do, in a bigger role on a team. Because, in the Spurs, he was never going to be, the first, second, or even third option. And he gets a chance to actually be something.
Yeah, he does. You're right. And there were some minutes definitely there. Rudy Gay probably will play some minutes at the 4, and Simmons can play a little bit at the 2. But I think you're right. And I've seen online from some Spurs guys that there's more to the story that hasn't come out yet. So I'm sure we'll see something about that soon enough.
Interesting.
But yeah, other than that, another role player signing, Tariq Black, signed with the Houston Rockets, a team he formerly played for. Gives them some nice inside presence. They were depleted last year when Nene went down. All they had was Clint Capella. So Black just gives them some insurance.
Yeah, Black, another guy, he started his career with Houston. He's 25 years old, so he's still relatively young. And for me, this is a good sign only because you just don't know what Nene has left in the tank. Or Nene. Nene. Nene had a very good season last year. For the most part, I think almost everyone's expectations he beat, probably. And up until he got hurt in the playoffs, they looked like a team that possibly could have gone to the Western Conference Finals if they didn't lose him and have to shorten that rotation to 7 guys. But Tariq Black is just that, he's a safety net. Nene comes out the gate and he's slow or he gets hurt. You have a young guy who you can just plug in because with Chris Paul and James Harden, they're going to be running a ton of lobs through pick and rolls.
Exactly. And even if you want to rest Nene a little bit, you can bring in Black. He can play some minutes. It kind of just gives you that insurance, and it's just a nice move by the Rockets. So, but talking free agency, there's not a ton of names left out there. Big names aren't really out there. Some of the more notable guys, Jamychal Green, started from Memphis a lot last year. A mobile 4, can play a little bit of small ball 5, can play defense, shoot the 3 ball. What are your thoughts on him? Where do you think he lands?
It's actually surprising. A lot of the names of these free agents is surprising. Because Jamychal Green, I would think he would get signed before Jerebko and Ilyasova and even Dedmon. Jamychal Green is a way more talented player than all 3 of those guys.
I should mention Jamychal Green is a restricted free agent, though.
Okay. So
But it has been reported that Memphis hasn't really offered him much. His agent has mentioned. I think that Memphis either lowballed them or didn't even offer them anything.
See, and that's that seems to be the tone, right, for this free agency, that if a guy is restricted, that a lot of people just don't want to go after them. Normally in years past, we see teams, chase their restricted free agents. Even if they don't sign them, they still offer them a contract. Otto Porter was the one big guy this offseason who we kind of figured was going to get a max deal from someone, and it was the Nets. But it's definitely surprising. I really can't think of a team besides the Grizzlies where Jamychal truly fits in. I guess if the Thunder had any money, he would fit well with them. I really don't know, Nick. You got any thoughts?
I think Brooklyn's going to look at him as a player to bring in. They have the money that they could actually sign him and pull him away from Memphis. It's, he's a solid player. It's tough to kind of gauge him because I think he's, late 20s. I want to say 27. He's another guy that's worked through the D-League. He does, like I mentioned on another pod, have some connection to Sean Marks. Sean Marks was part of that D-League team in San Antonio that he played on. So, I think he does fit the new NBA. It definitely says something if Memphis isn't kind of going back after him, especially if they lost Zebo. You think they'd be a little bit more aggressive, so that's interesting. But, it could kind of be something where teams are kind of sitting on him because there's only a few teams left that actually have cap room. So they have most of the leverage if you want that big long-term deal.
Yeah, and actually, he's a little bit younger than you thought. He's going to be 27 next year.
Yeah, yeah, not too bad. Yeah, I mean, he can still get a little bit better. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind if the Nets picked him up on a solid deal. He's a solid player because, like I mentioned, he can stretch the floor at the 4, and he can even play some small ball 5. He's not super long or anything, but he's got a big body.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy who, he's not going to give you – he's not like a giant like win share guy. He's not going to give you, a ton of added wins. But he's certainly a player who you can fit in around a decent core, and he can play very well. Like, actually, if the Timberwolves never went after Taj Gibson, Jamychal Green probably would have been a better fit for them in Minnesota.
Yeah, and he shoots a 3-ball at a pretty good percentage too, which is always positive for somebody who plays defense.
Yeah, he actually shot last year 37% from 3, and that's really good for a power forward.
Exactly. So I'm hoping the Nets kind of go after him. I think the Nets have like 16+ million cap space. They could make more if they wanted to. I don't think he'll be that much, but I think they're kind of just sitting on it. So see what happens with him. Another restricted guy we mentioned a little bit, Mason Plumlee. I haven't heard anything about Plumlee. Like, I haven't heard anything at all. I don't know what's going to happen with him. Have you heard much on Mason?
No, it's funny. Actually, last show we did, when you mentioned him as a restricted free agent, I really was like taken back. Like, I had to regather myself because I had no idea he was a restricted free agent. Just because, like you said, there has been nothing about Mason Plumlee, and it's weird because he had a very good first half of the season last year at Portland, and then when he got traded to Denver, a lot of people on at least NBA Twitter were really upset that Portland traded him because he's a big who runs the floor, he can pass, he can rebound, he's not overly gifted offensively, but he does a lot of the little things, and he's still relatively young. So it's definitely surprising that he's getting no looks. And whatever team scoops him up, I don't believe Denver is going to match this, or they're going to, even offer him a contract only because, they just got Paul Millsap, so they have a lot of money tied up. But Mason Plumlee is definitely an interesting person.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's tough to say if he's an NBA starter. Like you mentioned, he's not offensively gifted. He's a great passer, but he doesn't finish great inside. He obviously can't shoot the ball at all. His free throw percentage is bad. He's probably an average rebounder for his size. And defensively, I would say he's probably average. Some people might say above average, but he definitely has some flaws in that game. So he's in a weird situation. Somebody might offer him money. If somebody offers him not much, Denver might just get him back on a 1-year deal on the cheap or something. Just because nobody's.
It's definitely possible. I mean, and just something like he was having actually, I'm just looking at his stats right now. He was having a career year with Portland prior to being traded. And, he got traded to Denver. He lost, a couple of minutes off his game, and his game, dropped a little bit. And, that's the one thing I think that kind of hurt Plumlee, just the fact when he got traded to Denver, Jokic was becoming the guy, and we started seeing, that Jokic's probably going to be a star in this league in the future if he keeps developing as he was. So Plumlee kind of got lost in the mix of all those, centers that they have, power forwards with Fareed and all that. He kind of got lost, and I think that really hurt his free agency draft, like his free agency stock.
Yeah, and he just was never a great fit. I never liked the trade from the Denver perspective on that part. And the fact that Nurkic did so well with Portland, and Portland did better when Plumlee left, it kind of just left a bad taste. Teo would mention that in the last podcast. So I think that's definitely something that impacted him. Former MVP has not got signed yet. There's been some talk about Derrick Rose possibly going to Milwaukee. Other than that, there really hasn't been much chatter on the Rose. What are your thoughts on him? Where do you think he's going to end up?
Why? I don't understand why he would want to go to Milwaukee. Does he think he's going to be able to beat Derrick Rose on Milwaukee? Because he can't ball handle the way he does on Milwaukee. You know what I'm saying?
Unless it's a 6-man rule.
Yeah, good one.
I mean,
Derrick Rose as a 6-man. You think his ego won't let him take that role? But yeah, you're right. A 6-man Derrick Rose on Milwaukee, that's sick. That's actually just what they need because they don't have that scoring punch off the bench. I mean, they have Greg Monroe, but is that really a scoring punch? It's you're trading as many points as you're getting points with Greg Monroe on the floor. But Derrick Rose is interesting. I don't understand the true fascination with Milwaukee. A part of me still believes that he's probably going to end up. I know he probably can't end up in New York now. I don't think they have the money. But it's interesting. There's not very many teams that can even that don't. There's not very many teams that Derrick Rose can go to and be a starter, if any, at this point in free agency.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
don't
not
I don't
I'm not
see
really
him
sure what the
starting next
market
year.
is. I
Yeah,
just don't know what the market is for a ex MVP who gives you 16 points per game with slightly average efficiency rating, no playmaking, and very little defense. It's just he's just not the guy he was. And I think you mentioned this on the last pod. He's one of those guys who he was so athletically gifted that it kind of covered up his flaws. And now that he's a little bit older and the injuries have hit him, that we kind of see the flaws of his game a lot more than we used to.
exactly. That's a great point. And it's tough to see. Like you said, I don't see him starting anywhere. He'd have to take a bench role or a cheap 1-year deal. There has always been some mention of San Antonio taking him and maybe bringing him off the bench or something, or maybe even starting him. Pop will get him in line. So that always could be a possibility. But
I think though with them signing Patty Mills already, I just don't see the Spurs need for another point guard, especially because we saw that Murray kid in
yeah,
the
very true.
playoffs, and he really balled out when Tony Parker got hurt.
Moving on from Derrick Rose, another veteran point guard that once was an all-star and, caught pretty good hype around the NBA, Rajon Rondo. Still on sign. There's been some talk about him maybe going to the Lakers or the Pelicans. What are your thoughts on Rondo? Do you think he ends up with one of these teams?
I actually think Rondo, it's crazy to think from just last offseason to this offseason that Rondo would have more value than Derrick Rose. But even I think the Knicks may still be in talks possibly for Rondo. I'm not sure if they completely abandoned that front. But Rondo is one of those guys who, because he can play make, and because he's not a very good defender, but because he can rebound at a decent level, he can at least score, at least attack the basket. He just serves as a more all-around player compared to like a guy like Derrick Rose. Seeing him in LA, playing, behind Lonzo Ball, I'm not sure if Rondo's truly ready to accept a role like that. But it would certainly help Lonzo to learn from a guy like Rondo. It would certainly help Lonzo to learn from a guy like Rondo. Just how to play make, different scenarios as, a point guard who runs the show and pushes the tempo. And for the Pelicans, I think that's the ideal situation if you're Rondo. Only because you have Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins, who you've already played with, and I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure Cousins and Rondo had a very good relationship that 1 year in Sacramento.
They did.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So that could be a really good reunion, especially because I'm pretty sure Rondo averaged a league high assist that season too. That could be deadly having a playmaker like Rondo with those two twin towers.
Yeah, no, definitely. Rondo is probably, like you said, going to bring a little bit more value to the team because I think he'd be more accepting in a lesser role than Derrick Rose would be. He also is an unselfish player. The thing with Rondo is he just needs to be engaged. Like the difference between playoff Rondo and regular season Rondo is so drastic. He's so much more prepared for the playoffs, and defensively, he's just so much more engaged. Obviously, his shooting's not great, and it's always been an issue for him. He can just be, decent at that. He had a pretty decent year, I think, shooting the three for Chicago last year. But I agree with you. I'd kind of like to see him in Pelicans. They could play Drew Holiday off ball a little bit, and he can get some assists with Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins. Plenty of pick and rolls there. So, I think he'd be a nice piece for them to add off the bench, or maybe I don't think they'd start him, but I'd probably bring him off the bench and then play him with Holiday a little bit.
Yeah, and even if we say you come off the bench, Rondo can come off the bench and still play 25 to 30 minutes.
Exactly. People kind of exaggerate coming off the bench as like a terrible thing. In some systems, coming off the bench is not a bad thing at all.
No. Like you said, it's all about fit.
So, but other than that, no, not a ton of big names out there. Another guy he was once a restricted free agent, now unrestricted, Shabazz Muhammad. Not really much on him. I think the Nets and the Knicks have had some interest. Where do you think he lands?
I actually believe he's going to land with Brooklyn. Only because it's just like you said, there's just not very many teams out there, and I just think he kind of fits what Brooklyn's doing. He's only 24 years old. We've seen him in Minnesota in years past. He's an athletic guard, an athletic forward. He plays a 2-3. He actually plays some of the 4 too as well. But he's a guy who's still growing. He doesn't have a very good jump shot, he has to work on the 3-pointer, but he's gotten pretty much better almost every year he's been in the NBA. So I think a team like the Nets could take a risk on him. The Bucks, if the Bucks wanted to add, I know the Bucks had some conversation with them as well. If they wanted to add a bench player, this would be perfect for them because, like we mentioned, talking about Derrick Rose, the bench for Milwaukee is what truly is lacking for them. But he's not a guy who dramatically changes your team.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting piece. It's kind of hard to gauge him being in Minnesota. Last year, he had to take a little bit lesser role with, Wiggins, LaVine stepping up so much. And then, Muhammad's definitely an interesting guy. I could see him landing in Brooklyn. I could see him landing with one of these teams. He could also be another guy that takes a 1-year deal and then next year tries to get a bigger offer. We can get a place where he gets more minutes. So, but other than that, anybody out there that, really sticks out to you that is a big name or could really help a championship team or be that last piece on a contender off the bench?
I don't know if he's a truly game changer, but I do like Tony Allen. We're talking about a champion. We're talking about a guy who's played his last several seasons with the grit and grind Memphis Grizzlies. He's still a guy who when he's on the floor, you can just feel his impact. And actually, since he's gotten older, his offensive game has gotten better. I mean, there was a time with Boston where he could only defend because he couldn't shoot a lick. And he's at least he's not a good shooter by any means, but he's at least an average shooter. So I think adding a guy like him could just really push a team that's contending or a team that's buying. He could just be that veteran leadership off the bench that really helps guys, at least defensively.
Yeah, very true. He does have that defensive mentality. He's definitely a solid vet. I could see him kind of going two ways, either, joining a championship type team on a small deal, just being a guy that they could throw out there if they need to stop somebody, or him signing with like a rebuilding team and him being that veteran that kind of shows the young guys how to defend at the NBA level.
Yeah, and I know that there's been a couple of rumors that the Minnesota Timberwolves have interest in him. And
I like that fit.
Yeah, that would be a really good fit, I think, as well. Just for the fact that there's not they're getting more defense than they've had in the past. But, having another defender, especially off the bench, because, Crawford isn't a very good defender. Wiggins hasn't shown he's a very good defender yet. Just having a guy like Allen could, really help them in, short bursts.
Exactly. He's always the kind of guy you want around young guys, show them the right way to do it. But moving on from free agency players, we're going to talk free agency front office, kind of free agency front office. The Knicks made a trade for Scott Perry, vice president of the Kings, to become their general manager today. I think they sent a second-round pick in cash considerations. Perry signed a 5-year deal. The Knicks are trying to make changes after Phil Jackson was there and kind of screwed things up. What are your thoughts on this move by the Knicks? And Steve Mills was promoted to president of basketball operations.
Well, because, as James Dolan said today, it is a culture change. So Phil Jackson got his first gut punch. Yeah, you got to make changes. The Knicks, it has not been working in New York. I mean, granted, it has not been working in New York now for 15 plus years, but it's not working. And I know James Dolan again said he's going to stay out of basketball operations, which, whatever. If you don't want to be involved in your team's success, that's fine. But this is definitely an interesting move. Scott Perry has done a decent job, I guess, in Sacramento, if you want to say that. I just kind of think the Knicks will remain what the Knicks are.
Yeah, he was in Sacramento. He's only there for a few months, but they definitely made some good moves since he's gotten there. They had a great draft, a great offseason so far. It was actually kind of surprising that Sacramento let him go. Like you said, it's still going to be interesting to see what happens with the Knicks, what else changes. Mills is still there, and there's been talk about him being part of the problem too. And obviously there's some other front office pieces that Phil Jackson brought in that are probably still there. So they do need to make changes. And, if the Knicks want to do anything, they need to change the culture, and they need everything to, be back to basketball, not all that off the court drama. But already being there, there's already some more drama. And it's been told that, the Knicks pulled Melo off the trade block, and it's been reported that players aren't Melo's not happy about it, as well as the other teams not being happy about it. So there's already drama, even though they just got a new GM today.
Well, and the one thing I want to say about Scott Perry is too, like for Knicks fans in general, you can't judge him on the next 1 to 2 years or even 3 because he's got the god awful Joakim Noah contract. Was he involved in the Tim Hardaway Jr. contract? No, right? That
No,
was
he
done.
was not.
Right, exactly. So
before he got there, so
right. So you have 2 really bad contracts on the books. You still have Melo's $26 million, which it's not a bad contract if Melo plays as an all-star level caliber player or an ex-star player, which he was. But you have a lot of money locked up, and it's going to be hard to see what Scott Perry could do until we can get these guys off the roster and they can free up cap.
Especially that Noah contract. That one's terrible. The Hardaway contract, I mean, there's still potential with that of Hardaway becoming a better player, so it's not completely horrendous. We obviously know Joakim Noah is not going to get better. He has just the health issues. He's lucky if he's going to play probably 60 games. So, I mean, in the Melo thing, it's just a weird situation. Like, Phil Jackson ruined his value, and it was reported that the Knicks just weren't happy with the return they're going to get for him. Well, I mean, if Phil Jackson comes out and says that he doesn't want Carmelo in New York anymore, obviously, it's not going to have high value. And especially with reports coming out last week, I know you probably saw this on Twitter too. Everybody was like, oh, it's a lock. Carmelo's going to Houston this week. And there was like a report, the trade's on the 2-yard line. And then the next thing you know, the Knicks are pulling him off the market.
And not only did Phil Jackson ruin Melo's trade value, he also ruined Melo's relationship with the Knicks.
Yes.
Because the fact of the matter is, Phil Jackson slandering Melo time and time again. You didn't see, Mills come to Melo's defense. You didn't see James Dolan come to Melo's defense. The only time James Dolan stepped in is when Phil Jackson talked about trading Porzingis. And again, that may not directly involve Melo, but it involves Melo because your owner is protecting Porzingis but doesn't show any love to you, who's been on the team for the last 4 or 5 years, and you've been the face of the franchise. You brought them to the playoffs a couple of years ago. It's bringing them off the market. What do you think Melo wants to come back? He's not. There's no way Melo's going to walk into the Knicks front office, whenever they have a meeting and say, "Yeah, I'll come back." I just don't see it. There's been too much bad blood for Melo to want to stay in New York at this point.
Especially with the idea that it was reported that people around Melo said that he felt like he was going to Houston, like it was a lock. And for that not to happen, not only is it going to cause an issue with the whole Melo thing, but Houston's probably pissed off because we know that's the one team involved. It was rumored that it was a 4-team trade. So the other teams were kind of pissed. They were probably working on this trade for like a week, and then the Knicks get a new GM. They just want to pull out. It's definitely a weird situation. I mean, I guess I can understand it to the extent that, they brought in a new GM. At least let him talk to Melo and see what he has to say.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And, realistically, Scott Perry deserves a chance to sit down with Melo and at least pitch Melo for his future if Perry truly wants Melo there.
Or get a feel for Melo and where he wants to go. It's been reported he only wants to go to Houston or Cleveland. They're hoping, the Knicks, I guess, were hoping that maybe he'd be open to another team. Or also this could just be a ploy to kind of build his value back up. Oh, we're not going to trade him. Oh, so send us a better offer. But the thing is, 2 teams that he says he's available to go to just don't have assets to send. There's just not that many pieces that the Cavs or the Rockets can send out.
And what the issue too now, they have, like you said, there was that possible 4-team deal in the works, because no one wants Ryan Anderson, and Ryan Anderson will be involved in this trade.
Yeah.
So one of those teams was going to take that Ryan Anderson contract. And the fact that this might have been on the 2-yard line and you pulled the deal back, who knows if that team, whoever they were that were going to take that Ryan Anderson contract, now that they have time to think about it, maybe they won't want that Ryan Anderson contract now.
Or maybe that team spends the cap space they had that they were able to take that contract on,
Right.
So another issue with that. So, I mean, it's definitely a weird situation. And it's not really like the Knicks crew that I'm blaming now. It's more just like more Phil Jackson after effect. If he never came out and just ruined the value of Melo, it's terrible when everybody knows that you want to trade a player. The same thing happened with Paul George. Everybody knew that Paul George was going to be traded. So the Pacers had no leverage. Having no leverage in a trade is probably the worst situation you could be in. That's why it's probably better to trade a player a little early than it is a little late.
Well, Nick, it was overstated, how much Paul George wanted to leave. So, but yeah, no, you're right. The more that it gets out to the media, the worse it is for trade value. That's just how it is. The more the people know, the more the teams know, the worse deal you're going to get. And actually, what the Knicks could have just done is they could have just ruined any chance to trade Melo, and they might have to end up buying him out, which then becomes an entire different situation because, the Cavs and then the Houston Rockets will be in a slight bidding war to try and get him.
Yeah, and then who knows, maybe another team jumps in. I mean, it's not like obviously Melo has ties to Chris Paul and LeBron, but who knows? Maybe San Antonio calls you. You might have to answer the phone at least to hear what Pop has to say.
For sure.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just a weird situation, and the buyout is what Melo asked the Knicks for, and they didn't give it to him. But it'd be funny if they end up having to give it to him just because it makes no sense. And I mean, it's like, what are they going to pitch to Melo? Are they going to be like, oh, maybe we can make the playoffs in the East this year because it's so bad, and we can bring in like another decent piece for you? But it's not like they have much cap left. Like, it's not like Tim Hardaway Jr. is like, oh, making me want to stay.
You know what? What's funny too? It's like that commercial with the guy in the dollar. You got to be faster than that. It was like someone just went to Melo with the Houston, like, you're going to contend for a title. Oh, you got to be like, just pull it away from Melo every chance he gets,
Exactly.
to actually play for a winning team. Because the fact of the matter is, even if Melo stays in New York, like you said, what are they? A 7 seed at best?
Exactly, and that's not even a lock.
Exactly. It's, this has been probably the most frustrating time of Melo's career these last, 12 months or so.
It definitely has. And, having the opportunity to play like a team with Houston would be great because if they get Melo, I mean, they're not favorites to beat the Warriors, but they're at least in the realm.
But yeah, because anytime you add, as Daryl Morey would say, the more USA basketball players you have, the better your team is. And it's true.
Exactly. And think about it this way, as someone pointed this out on Twitter, Melo's going to be getting like the second or third best defender on the team instead of the first defender and getting doubles and triples like he got in New York for the last 5 years. So it's going to be a lot better for Carmelo Anthony to play alongside a James Harden and a Chris Paul than it would be to stay in New York.
And not to mention, we always say, Carmelo's a ball stopper, he's a very isolated player. But if you're playing with two playmakers like James Harden and Chris Paul, especially James Harden, who, keeps progressing as a player, he attacks the rim. Can you imagine how many wide open kickouts a guy like Carmelo is going to get in an offense like that?
It'd be like Olympic Carmelo. It'd be like Olympic Carmelo where he's just kind of feeding off everybody. And I think like it's a little bit overstated that Carmelo's such an ISO player. Some of it has been like the Knicks offense. It hasn't just been like, oh, Melo's like, let me just lock up with a ball. When they had a pretty good year and they lost to the Pacers in the second round, that team wasn't as ISO based. There was a lot more ball movement. And I think, Melo will benefit, especially later in his career, to get more ball movement and play with playmakers, like you mentioned, Harden and Chris Paul.
Yeah, I do agree, and a lot of times, at least the recent years since that, that playoff run they had, the team hasn't been as good. And when your team isn't as good, your star player has to do more. We saw it with Kobe Bryant. When your team is bad, you have to hold on to the ball more and you have to try and will the team to wins. And that's what Carmelo had to try and do in New York.
Exactly. And it's not like, other than Porzingis, there hasn't been a lot of great pieces around him in his time in New York. It's always been a weird situation where they never really surrounded him with the right talent to win a championship.
No, and even having Porzingis, Porzingis is not at that level in which you can say, all right, you can go out there and give me a solid 20. Because Porzingis has not proven himself to be that, that consistent everyday threat.
Yeah, very true. And they're just kind of on different timelines. Obviously, by the time Porzingis hits his prime, Melo's going to be close to out the door. Or at the later end of his career. But talking about young players, Summer League has been going on. Las Vegas Summer League, the Utah and Orlando Summer Leagues already passed. But who's stuck out to you so far in Las Vegas?
It's all right. This is tough. This is actually really tough. Because this has actually been like a saving grace for the summer. There's always that weird time between the NBA Finals and Summer League where there's no basketball. And even though free agency is awesome, you still want to see basketball. So seeing these young guys play is always tremendous for me. Lonzo Ball has made me. I'm never going to slander him for at least a couple months because he's been incredible.
You can slander his shoes.
Oh, you're right. Well, he's wearing Nikes now, so who knows what's going on with that. But Dennis Smith Jr.
Impressive.
Man, oh man, that kid could be good. I mean, like the way he attacks the basket, I know his jump shot, people thought, in the draft, was questionable if he could hit the three. He's been hitting the three. And I, not to, punish the Knicks anymore, but if this guy turns out to be really good, that's just like, way to go, Knicks. Another blunder by you. Yeah, but he's been incredible. And then Tatum, man, he's got that Kobe fadeaway just locked down. I mean, and the tough shots he's been making has been incredible. How the hell did the Warriors get Jordan Bell? It's, Dennis Smith for me has been the standout by far. What about you, Nick?
No, Dennis Smith has definitely been that guy. I actually watched a little of him last night. I don't know if you saw last night where he almost posterized somebody in that game against the Kings. Like you said, it's just an athletic ability just to jump out of the gym. He has like star written all over him. Obviously, I try to take everything with a huge grain of salt watching this because of the competition level and, just a whole bunch of different variables to what's going on in Summer League. It's not the NBA. You mentioned a guy before, John Collins for the Hawks. He's had a few ferocious dunks as well. He's definitely just seemed like a baller out there. Talking about ballers, you mentioned Lonzo. Lonzo's definitely showed his feel for the game. He's also showed a few of his flaws, but he just has that, that great feel for basketball. And you could just tell he's going to have a positive impact for the Lakers, and it's good to see for them.
Yeah, the one thing I'm, because I've already been critical of Lonzo, so let me continue. I never thought he was going to be a bad playmaker. Never once did I doubt his playmaking abilities. My biggest issue with Lonzo still to this date is his size and his shooting ability. Because I still don't – I know Sean Marion had a weird jump shot, and it worked out for him. I don't trust that jump shot in the NBA against the top players in the league. It's
going to be tough for him to get that off as a point guard because of coming off pick and rolls and, players being up in your grill. Marion obviously didn't have to run the point guard duty, and he got a lot of corner threes from Steve Nash. So I think you make a great point. That jump shot is it's definitely a tough – he might have to mess with that a little bit and change his release. If he can start hitting it consistently, it'll be great, but it's still like the low release point definitely hurts.
And I know there's people out there listening who are saying, well, Steph Curry had a very low jump shot in college, and he turned out to be the best shooter of all time. Well, one of them. So, yes, it is possible that he can change this jump shot and become an incredible shooter, but it's not as easy as said as done.
Exactly. It still takes work, and I'm not sleeping on the kid because he's definitely been impressive. I'm happy to see my guy Caris LeVert playing well. He's definitely showcased some nice ability attacking the rim and playmaking. Another positive sign for the Nets. You mentioned Jordan Bell. I think he had that 5x5 game. Anytime you can do that, it's great. Obviously there's a couple guys around the league that have definitely been impressive. We're not going to touch on them all. It's always good to see the guys compete, though. But like I said before, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. This doesn't necessarily mean much in the big picture. You're just getting a small taste of what these players can do in this situation.
And pretty much too, just to piggyback on that, the guys who go in the lottery, they better dominate Summer League. Like, there's an issue if you were drafted top 12 and you're struggling. Like, that's not a good sign because a lot of these players.
Laurie Marketing, I think he drafted 7th or something, and he's been struggling.
Yeah, it's those are the red flags. The guys that are struggling against the lower talent. You got to think about it. One player pretty much from all these Summer League teams makes it to an NBA roster, maybe two. Most of them.
Well, it depends. It depends. Some of them, like a few of the teams, I would say, are throwing, like the Nets or the Kings, are throwing out about 4 or 5 guys.
True. Oh, you're right. My fault. So, like, it depends on the team, obviously. But, a lot of these guys, they stay in the G League for next season. So.
Yeah, no, but you're right. Some of these teams might have, 2 guys on the team that are going to be on the NBA roster because they're not really into player development, or they're just more about, having guys on their roster that are veterans ready to contribute now. But it's just, and with that though too, it's a grain of salt. Like, some of these young players are super raw, and you're kind of banking on them developing, not necessarily what they're doing now. So it's fun. Summer League's a ton of fun to watch, and it's good to see your team win, even if it doesn't count. But you just take everything with a grain of salt. But that wraps it up for today. Corey, thank you for hopping on. And as always, thanks everybody for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think. Let us know we're good or we suck.
Till the next time.